Sherrilyn Ifill, lead of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, announced today in a Washington Post story that she is stepping down from the organization in 2022. Janae Nelson, her longtime number 2, will be taking over. I caught up with her earlier today where we talked about her legacy, why she is leaving, what she plans to do, and the significant challenges still facing African Americans and others when it comes to the fight for democracy and voting rights in America. All right, Sherrilyn, so what's the deal? You trying to go hang out in Jamaica, Hawaii? You trying to go to Ghana? You're leaving. What's going on?
You know me better than that. No, this is my life's work, and I am not retiring. I'm too young to retire. And you know, what we have seen in this country and what is happening to Black people is too dire for me to leave the work of racial justice. But what I am doing is stepping away from LDF, the organization that I love, where I started my career as a baby lawyer. And I'm stepping away because I think, you know, many people know that I am very serious about Black institutions, and particularly about this institution that's been a part of my life for 30 years, and ensuring its strength. And I think transition is part of leadership. I wanted to do this in an orderly way. I wanted to do it at the right time when LDF is really strong financially in terms of strategy and leadership. And frankly, Roland, I wanted the new leader to have a few years of an aligned administration before 2024, which I had when I came aboard. It was in the final years of the Obama administration. And that meant that in 2016, you know, I was ready and equipped and had my legs strongly planted beneath me. And I'd like that for the next leader. We don't know what 2024 will bring, but we know it's going to be a very serious and volatile time. So I'm not leaving. If you know me, you know I'm not going to shut my mouth, and I'm going to keep working. But I'm looking forward to finding out what is the next way that I'm supposed to do this work.
You're 58 years old. You laid
Why
out.
We got to go there, Ryan? Why, I mean, Roland. Why we got to go with the age?
No.
I mean, I just
here's
don't know.
Here's why. Breathe. Woosah.
I'm very calm.
The reason I'm saying that is because when we look at a lot of Black institutions, people die in positions. They're there till they're 70 and 80. And what you just described is something that, frankly, is very rare in a lot of our traditional Black organizations. That is leaving before 60, bringing in the next leader serving under you, planning a transition, and actually having an organization that actually is healthier than when you arrived, and you're passing it on to someone else and it's not in a state of disrepair. That's actually rare.
I'm so happy to hear you notice that, Roland, because everything I do in relationship to this organization is intentional, and has been from the very beginning. This is also intentional. As I said, I'm quite serious about, and if we haven't learned anything the last 5 years, we should have learned about the importance of Black institutions. And LDF is an institution. And as much as I love it, it is not mine. It doesn't belong to me. And I have never tried to create a vanity project out of my leadership of LDF. And the job of leaders, it's difficult. It's leading on the substantive work. It's leading your staff. It's having vision and voice. But it's also stewarding an institution. And when you're stewarding an institution created by Thurgood Marshall, it's no joke. I take it very, very seriously. And so, yes, I was told very early on by a business leader that, you know, succession and transition and thinking that through is part of leadership. And I've taken it very seriously. I think you've had Janae Nelson on your show, our Associate Director Counsel, my deputy. I have tried to give her as much of a platform as possible. She is brilliant. She is also started out at LDF about 10 years after I did, but as a voting rights attorney. She's also a former law professor. We have a lot in common. She is, but she will bring her own touch. The staff feels held because they know that they have a sense of continuity. She's been with me for 8 of the 10 years that I'll have been at LDF as leader. And so you hold the organization and you keep the organization strong. And that's how, for me, I know that I've been a successful leader. Not just that the staff is 5 times the size it was when I started. Not just that the budget and the endowment are 5 times the size they were when I started. That's a pretty big deal, and I'm not minimizing that, because I also believe that Black institutions need the resources to do excellent work. And I told the board when I interviewed for the job that we would not be nickeling and diming, that I would figure out how to resolve financial issues within the organization, and that I would raise money for. I'd never raised a dime before in my life. In fact, I had been on the other side, chairing the board of a foundation. But I believe in LDF so much. I know how to describe what is necessary to deal with racial inequality. I know the threat that white supremacy poses, not just to Black people, but to our entire democracy. And I felt sure that I could convince people that LDF was the right organization to invest in.
And I know somebody who's watching or listening, and they're like, okay, Roland, why are you making a big deal out of this? Because you said something that is key, and that is, and I've said this for years as somebody who has run 3 Black newspapers, and one of them, the historic Chicago Defender. And I look at Robert Abbott, who founded the paper. He prepared his nephew to take it over when he retired. Well, when John Sinstack passed away, he left the paper in a state of flux. It was all over the place. The family members, it was drama. It was all this sort of stuff. And so what was built, just in many ways, it diminished. And when I took it over, they hadn't made a profit in 20 years. And so I've said for a long time, great leaders are not determined on how they ran organizations during their tenure. It's also how they positioned it after their tenure.
Yes, I couldn't agree with you more. And it's difficult because I love LDF. I could keep doing this work. I feel happy that people are sad that I'm leaving, because that means I've been doing the work well. I'm not overly modest about my contributions to this work because I feel passionately about it. But I also know that this is an 80-year institution that I led for and will have led for 10 years. That means for 70 years, the institution managed to survive without me in leadership. And as I said, when you start with Thurgood Marshall, you have to be really serious about ensuring that the organization is strong. And LDF is so necessary at this moment in this country. I think we showed, certainly over the last 5 years, how mission critical we are to the protection of Black people and to American democracy. And that's the position I wanted to leave LDF in. I wanted to leave it financially secure so that the next leader would not be inhibited in executing strategy by lack of resources, so that whatever has to be done has to be done. And we see it this year. We don't have our federal voting rights bill yet. I'm still pushing on that. And that means we have to litigate more. We just filed suit against Alabama, in fact, 2 suits against Alabama for redistricting this week. We filed suit against South Carolina for their failure to begin their redistricting. We're litigating against Georgia and Texas and Florida for their voter suppression laws. It's not fun to play whack-a-mole, but if that's what we have to do, that's what we're going to do until we have federal legislation to help us. We are not going to go quietly into this good night. We are here to protect and strengthen the full citizenship and dignity of Black people in this country. And the rest of the country benefits because that makes our democracy healthier.
You asked why I have to bring the age part up. Here's why. Hugh Price, when he left the National Urban League, he was 60 years old. And I remember when I interviewed him, and he said, Roland, I'm leaving because I'm young enough to still have the energy to do one more strong play.
That's
and
right.
The reason that always stuck with me, that always stuck with me because I think people have to think about that. The reality is, it's sort of just look. When I decided to launch this, I told my agent, "Why turn TV One down?" I said, "I'm 49. I said I'll be 50 in November. This was 3 years ago. I just turned 53, and I said if I don't do this now, I never will." And that's also part of this. You still want to be vibrant and want to be able to have the energy to do it. And so that's why I also brought that up, because that also factor in where you said, okay, you know what, I've led it, but you know what, I still got pep in my step. I still want to go do something and still have the vibrancy to do it.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I prayed that I would have another chapter after leading LDF. I had no idea when I would leave, but I wanted to have another chapter. I may have 2. And especially given what we've seen in this country, I do think that, in fact, I feel like I've learned a lot about America over the last 9 years, more than I knew before. And part of the reason I'm now writing a book, and I'm really grateful to Penguin Press for believing in me to write this opus that I'll be working on, is to assemble those thoughts and to pull them together for myself, but also to share them with the country and to help set a kind of template for the next way that I am supposed to contribute to this work. I wanted to be a civil rights lawyer from the time I was a girl. I was obsessed with politics and social justice and Black people, and that's never diminished. And I'm going to continue doing that. I'm going to continue doing that work, but just in a different way. And I think that's what life is supposed to be. When I left LDF the first time, I was 30 years old, and I went off to teach. And I moved to a city I had never even visited before, except for my job interview, and that was Baltimore. And as you know, Roland, many people think I'm from Baltimore. That's how much I kind of took to working in this town and training the next generation of lawyers. You know, I've taught thousands of law students, and I started, you know, an environmental justice clinic the first year I came, and then I started one of the first clinics in the country focused on the legal rights of those returning from prison. And then as I was leaving, the last 2 years I was leaving, I started a reparations clinic, which really was exciting. I wrote what I think of as one of the most important texts about the ongoing effects of lynching on communities around the country, a book called On the Courthouse Lawn. And that book later became part of an important template in the thinking of Brian Stevenson and the folks at EJI as they began to create the lynching memorial in Alabama. So that time I spent in academia strengthened me and prepared me to lead LDF. And I'm sure that the time I've spent at LDF has strengthened and prepared me for whatever is the next chapter.
I've interviewed a lot of people coming out of the civil rights movement, the Black freedom movement, then also what I call the post-civil rights movement babies. And one of the things that has been very interesting, there was a period of about 15 or 20, or some say 25 years, where there were a lot of folks who said, you know what, I don't want to do civil rights work. I want to go into corporate. I want to be able to impact African Americans from that space. And then I dare say in the past decade, there's been a resurgence among young people and even Black folks who have been in corporate America who say, wait a minute, hold up. That work is even more vital. Have you seen that? Have you and in your conversations with people, what have you been saying to them why they should be considering the vital work of civil rights law as opposed to let's just go make a corporate play?
Well, absolutely. I've seen it, Roland. And I think for many people in this country, many people wanted to believe that the worst of our racial problems had been solved. And people allowed themselves to be lulled by the election of a Black president and the presence of a Black attorney general and so on and so forth. And while those were important milestones, as I shared, those of us who do this work for a living knew what was beneath the surface. Now many millions more people know because Trump was an accelerant who kind of unearthed what was below the surface. But we knew it. Most of the work we do at LDF is in the South. And so we knew that there was an incredible amount of work still to be done. And I think many more people now recognize that. They have seen the videos of police killings of unarmed Black people. They saw January 6th. They saw the election of an openly white supremacist president. And they saw all of the people, including much of an entire political party that was prepared to support him, despite knowing that. They saw Charlottesville. And so people have come to recognize that. So one of the things that I'm proudest of that we accomplished at LDF is that we launched last year something called the Marshall Motley Scholarship Program. It is named for Justice Thurgood Marshall and for Judge Constance Baker Motley, who's a former LDF attorney, first Black woman federal judge, first Black woman to argue in the United States Supreme Court, who litigated successfully most of the cases desegregating Southern universities. And through that scholarship, we pay the full ride for 10 law students each year. We will offer them summer fellowships. They will have internships. They will have a 2-year fellowship after they leave the organization. And then they make a commitment to work for an additional 8 years in the South. All in all, we will incubate 50 new civil rights lawyers focused on the South. That's part of the commitment because we understand the importance of ensuring that we can keep the troops that we need going forward. And one of the things that kept many people from pursuing this work is that, higher education is so expensive. Undergraduate school, law school, I didn't finish paying off my student loans until I was 41. And many people, find it difficult to imagine taking that on, and it's even more expensive now. So we wanted to remove that for 10 committed, clear young people a year. And they are so inspiring. You can look up, go Google Marshall Motley Scholars, and you'll find them, and you'll find their videos, and you can learn more about them. Because that's what we have to do. We have to build generations of troops. We can see now that racism is far from over in this country, and it's going to take our life's work. Now, some people don't do it for a living every day, but you can contribute the way you can. Some people who are in the corporate space contribute by working pro bono with LDF, by offering services to the organization or other civil rights organizations. Some people do it by contributing. Some people do it by volunteering. However is the way that you can contribute, by sharing good information, with your cohort of folks. Democracy requires work. And that's one of the messages I've been trying to push, Roland. This is not ever going to be fully done. You don't just have a democracy, you open up the box, you set everything up, and now it's done. It's work. And we're going to have to keep maintaining it if we want it to go forward. And so I hope people realize that now, that citizenship requires much, much more than perhaps many people thought.
When you look back on coming in at the time that you did you think it would be this dangerous, the period that we're in right now? When you look at the ridiculous things that are happening with these anti-critical race theory people, flat out lying, all just the craziness has been going on, all everything like that. But then you talk about the voting laws and the massive voter suppression and how technical they have been operating, and how delicate with the algorithms and the surgical way they've been doing it. It is shocking to a lot of other people. How have you seen it, and what are you conveying to future leaders to understand the dangerous situation that we're literally in right now when it comes to our freedoms, the freedom to vote, the fighting, not only that, but criminal justice reform, things along those lines. This moment that we are in.
I will not pretend that this has not been surprising and shocking, not the ongoing reality of white supremacy and racism, but the way in which any sense of shame, any sense of reticence has been removed from the willingness to fully and publicly embrace racism and white supremacy. I think that is incredibly shocking, to watch millions of Americans turn their back on what was in many ways one of the finest moments in this country, which was the civil rights movement. And I think many people believed that. I can remember being a young lawyer and running into lawyers who would so happily, sometimes they worked in corporations, and they would say, "Oh, I was part of Freedom Summer." It was like a badge of honor. To see so much of the country turn away from that, to see our political system turn away from norms. As we speak today, Representative Paul Gosar was censured in the House for memes that he posted, in which he seemed to fantasize about killing a fellow House member, Representative Ocasio-Cortez. That the censure happened. I'm so glad it did happen. But I saw so many people from his party stand up and support him. January 6th, frankly, by the end of the Trump administration, it didn't surprise me. But the willingness of people to lay down to President Trump, people who knew just months before how toxic he was, how dangerous he was, the willingness of many members of my own profession to aid and abet the unraveling of our democracy. Yes, this is all incredibly shocking and disturbing. But when I was a baby lawyer, I remember that a civil rights icon, and I still to this day believe it was Charles Sherrod, said at a meeting, at a conference, that racism is a shapeshifter, right? And I've always believed that, and I have believed that our job is to be able to see it in all its guises and to be able to recognize it and to recognize its danger. But recognize it will always shift. It's not going to stay in the same form. And so that's the part that should not surprise us. What should not surprise us is that it is going to shift and turn. And we have to recognize that we have to stand strong against it. Someone like Mr. Trump didn't create it, but he was an accelerant, and therefore he was quite dangerous. And so we have a lot of work to do to repair norms, to repair ethics, to recognize that we need new laws, and that perhaps we've relied too much on norms and ethics, and that we need to be a lot more direct about what is permitted and what is not permitted, and about where the gaps are in the foundation of our democracy.
And not only when it comes to what Republicans and conservatives are doing, but it also has been a stark reminder that we have to remind those who are our so-called allies, Democrats, that they have to have the courage to go as hard as they can. We're literally seeing Democrats, senators out of Arizona and West Virginia and a few others, unwilling to end the filibuster to deal with voting rights. And you're watching Republicans literally gerrymander themselves into controlling the U.S. House for the next decade. And so the battle is also challenging allies, saying you cannot be quiet.
No, that is absolutely right. You know, I've been in those direct meetings with Senator Manchin. This is one of the flaws in our democracy, right? That, you know, you just identified two people and maybe three who can stand in the way of legislation that will protect the rights of 12% of the population of Black people and, you know, more than 25, close to 30 of Latino people to be able to vote and participate in the political process. That is a structural flaw, regardless of the personalities. I've worked with a number of Democrats who are working in good faith to try to pass this voting legislation. We continue to await the willingness of a Republican to do so. Senator Murkowski was the one Republican willing to vote for debate. So we're not talking about even voting for the bill at this point. We couldn't get more than one Republican to vote to even debate the bill. So we are in serious trouble. The Voting Rights Act was never a partisan piece of legislation. As you know, it was reauthorized in 2006, 98-0 in the Senate, 396-33 in the House. That was in 2006. And in just this period of time, it has become untouchable to one political party to support ensuring that citizens of this country who are Black and brown and Asian American and Native American have a full opportunity to participate in the political process. So yes, we have to lean in everywhere we can. I do think it's important for us to identify the people who are holding things up. It's actually not the Democrats. It's actually some people who are holding it up, and they have to be
precisely.
They have to be accountable for their place in history, and we have to continue to push to try and really ensure that this legislation goes forward. I'm determined in the months that I remain as President and Director Counsel of LDF to make it happen.
I'm here in Brunswick, Georgia, where we are covering the case of the three white men on trial for killing Ahmaud Arbery. And, you know, the reality is it was pressure that for us to get to this point. I mean, you had DAs who were literally allowing this to go on and not have any justice whatsoever. One of the things that has really happened during your tenure, we have seen now the public fully embrace not just civil rights attorneys, but the importance of who is DA. We've never seen these number of progressive district attorneys, African Americans who are being DA. People are attacking, oh, Kamala Harris, she was a cop when she was a DA attorney general. But the district attorney is the one who sits at the nexus of mass incarceration and unjust laws. And so we can't just be civil rights lawyers. We got to have people with civil rights legal minds as DAs.
I'll take it a step further. You know, my mantra, Roland, around voting rights has been leave no power on the table. And we post that on Twitter all the time. And we post it in the context of talking about our responsibility to get serious about local offices. And that includes the DA. I mean, if you care about criminal justice and you care about racism in the criminal justice system, then you have to care about who's the prosecutor. You have to care about who's the judge. Many people are watching and have watched the Kyle Rittenhouse trial and have, been extremely disturbed about the conduct of the judge. That is an elected judge who has run unopposed a number of times. I think he's been on the bench 40 years. So pay attention to judicial elections. Sheriffs, pay attention to sheriff elections. Sheriffs are the ones actually who evict you. Sheriffs are the ones who make the connection with immigration officials to do these kinds of interdictions. And there's a whole movement on the right to activate sheriffs in support of the far right. They have programs that they're using to try and train sheriffs, and we're seeing around the country this movement of sheriffs. And if we see another attempt to overturn elections and so forth, I have no doubt that some of these sheriffs will be part of it. So we don't have the luxury of standing back from any office and suggesting that we won't do it. You can't say you care about criminal justice, reform, mass incarceration, and racism in the criminal justice system and walk into the voting booth and not know the difference between the sheriff candidates, or when it says for the judicial races, pick 3, and you don't know any of them, or you know only one. And when I say this, I'm speaking to myself as well, because I've had that experience. We have to get serious not just about casting the ballot, but about being educated about who we're voting for. They don't all have to be black, but they do have to align with your values of what you want to see in our criminal justice system. We're seeing the so-called anti-CRT movement, the anti-truth movement. So it matters who sits on the school board. Do you vote in school board elections? I know when we go in the booth, we vote for president. I know we vote for senator. I know we vote for governor. I know we vote for mayor. But do we vote for school board members? Do we vote for the Public Service Commission? If you live in Texas, do you vote for the Railroad Commission, and do you know what the Railroad Commissioner does? Leave no power on the table. We have to begin to educate ourselves about these local offices, about the power they have. We have to be prepared to support candidates whose views are aligned with the kind of world we want to live in, and we have to vote in those elections. There are elections every year, Roland, not every 2 years, not every 4 years.
Yep.
I'm sure if you check, you will find that there are elections, maybe there are ballot initiatives, raising bond money for the library or for public pools or to amend the Constitution. You need to educate yourself and do it every year. And I'm talking to myself as well, because I can be inconsistent with the offices too, with knowing, who the different candidates are. It's a lot of work. And maybe, Roland, your platform can become one where we begin to talk about some of those local races and talk about what those officials do, what their powers are, and how that affects the rights of Black people.
Absolutely. 2 final questions. First, there are a lot of cases that y'all been involved in. You have said that you want LDF to be seen sort of as a private Department of Justice. Are there a couple that, for you, where you say, this is why I chose this work, that really stand out?
One of them, which is a case certainly the Department of Justice would never bring because they would be on the other side of it, is, last year, crazy as it seemed, January 30th, I stood with representatives of the United States Postal Service to unveil the Gwen Ifill stamp. It was one of the proudest moments, for our family. But 9 months later, I became convinced we had to sue the United States Postal Service to get ballots delivered and prioritized for the 2020 election. And that's what we did. It was an unusual piece of litigation, but we believed it was essential, and we did it during COVID. And participated in those hearings. We were before Judge Sullivan. Our litigation director, Sam Spital, was arguing and working on the case well into the night. The hearings lasted 8 o'clock in the evening. But you remember around that election when we were talking about ballots not being delivered in places like Georgia and in places like Detroit and Cleveland and other cities. That was LDF. Working with our co-counsel at Public Citizen to make sure that happened. I was very, very proud of that litigation. I'm also proud of the fact that we were unafraid and willing to sue even President Trump for his actions after the election in attempting to ensure that ballots were not counted that came from places with large Black populations and his attempt to influence the election. We sued him under Section 11B of the Voting Rights Act. We later brought claims under the Ku Klux Klan Act and included the RNC. We don't take these things lightly, but we do take very seriously that the Voting Rights Act protects not only the right of Black people to cast a ballot, but to have that vote counted and added appropriately to the tally of votes, which means all that stuff you saw about disqualifying ballots is implicated by the Voting Rights Act. I was incredibly proud of the work we did last year. And I mentioned the pandemic because we're people too. Our lawyers were also concerned about their families and their children. Many of them have young children, and they were homeschooling while they were litigating all our cases last year. Just an extraordinary staff, and it really was an incredibly proud period for me, a very strenuous and stressful one, but I was just incredibly proud.
50 years from now, 100 years from now, there's going to be a young African-American woman, a young African-American man, someone who's white, Hispanic, Asian, Native American, doesn't matter. They're going to be looking through news stories and looking at history books, and they're going to come across the NAACP Legal Defense Fund and the 21st century. They're going to come across the name of Sherrilyn Ifill. What is the one thing you want that person to understand about you in this moment, this period in which you run the organization? What's that one thing you want them to know and understand?
I think it's about commitment. It's really about commitment to this work and what that looks like. And when you're committed to the work, one of the reasons that I'm quite joyful in the work, as exhausting and stressful as it is, I work all the time. There's not an hour of any day that I have not, since I took this job, that I've not thought about LDF or our work. And, you know, it's been unrelenting. That is absolutely true. But what pushes you forward, and I'm sure you experience this, Roland, with what you're accomplishing right now, is commitment. When you are committed and you are dedicated to, you know, the cause of justice, to the cause of your people, you can do it. You can show up and you can really be elevated almost out of yourself in terms of power and clarity, and people will feel it. And I think people feel it when they listen to me, when they see me. They know that I am serious about that commitment, that it brings me incredible peace and joy to be walking in what I believe I was called to do.
Well, it has been a great run. You definitely have the energy and spirit to do a lot more. Can't wait, as you say, to see what the next chapter or two or three could be, very well be. Congratulations on the tenure. And I'm quite sure you will happily say, okay, Janae, now you get to take these phone calls and these media requests, and it's now on you. Have fun. Have at it.
I will. But she knows I will be there for her. Any help and advice she needs, as former director counsels Elaine Jones and Ted Shaw have been there for me. And she will be fantastic as a director counsel for this period of time, for sure.
All right. We appreciate it. Thanks for all of your work and dedication. As you say, your commitment. We appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Roland.
Folks, back to our Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment.
Time to be smart.
Roland Martin's doing this every day.
Oh, no!
punches.
Thank you, Roland Martin, for always giving voice to the issues.
Look for Roland Martin in the whirlwind, to quote Marcus Garvey again.
The video looks phenomenal, so I'm really excited to see it on my big screen.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
I got to defer to the brilliance of Dr. Carr and to the brilliance of the Black Star Network.
I am rolling with Roland all the way.
Honored to be on a show that you own. A black man owns the show.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
I'm real revolutionary right now. Roland was amazing on there.
Stay black. I love y'all.
I can't commend you enough about this platform that you've created for us to be able to share who we are, what we're doing in the world, and the impact that we're having.
Let's be smart. Bring your eyeballs home.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
You dig?